Emma Sanchez's earliest memory was not of dolls, cartoons, or playground slides, but of Thunderjet thunder. She was 4 years old, perched on her father's shoulders at the annual Wings over Houston Air Show. The ground shook as two F-16s roared overhead, leaving white trails stitched across a perfect Texas sky. The crowd erupted in cheers, but little Emma didn't clap. She only stared upward, mouth open, heart hammering. Her father chuckled, bouncing her slightly. "Like that, Nia?" he asked. She didn't answer. Something inside her had shifted, as though the sky itself had whispered a promise. From that day forward, Emma was obsessed. While other children colored princess castles, she filled pages with crude drawings of aircraft. She would sit cross-legged on the porch, eyes glued to the heavens whenever a jet passed by. By 7, she could already tell the difference between a C-130 cargo plane and an F/A-18 Hornet. Her mother teased her, calling her mi pequeña piloto, but there was pride behind the laughter. Emma carried the nickname like a badge. At school, Emma's interests set her apart. While friends swapped stories about pop stars, she carried around dog-eared aviation magazines scavenged from library sales. In science class, she begged for extra assignments on aerodynamics. Her teachers noted her determination. One wrote on her report card, "Emma shows remarkable focus for her age. She will go far." But focus was not always enough to win her classmates' respect. "You want to fly jets?" A boy scoffed during recess one day. "That's for guys." His friends laughed. Emma didn't argue. She only clenched her fists and silently vowed she would prove him wrong. Her father supported her dreams as best he could. He had worked as a mechanic at the small regional airport, and though his job was modest, his stories of engines and propellers fueled her passion. He would take her to the hangars on weekends, letting her peer into cockpits, her tiny fingers tracing the warm controls. "One day," he whispered as she sat in a grounded Cessna, "you'll be the one in that seat, and I'll be the proudest dad alive." Emma believed him. High school brought new challenges. Aviation remained her obsession, but now the stakes were higher. To become a military pilot, she needed top grades, physical fitness, and leadership skills. She joined the junior ROTC program, rising through its ranks with the same tenacity she once showed in the classroom. At dawn, she ran laps on the track, lungs burning, legs aching, but she never quit. Her instructors admired her grit. "Sanchez," one sergeant said, "you've got fire in you. Don't let anyone put it out." Despite the encouragement, obstacles lurked everywhere. Guidance counselors suggested nursing, teaching, or accounting fields they believed were more practical. When Emma repeated that she wanted to fly fighters, their smiles grew thin. "That's a very competitive path," they would say, and frankly, not many women make it. She listened politely, then went home to study harder. She taught herself trigonometry late into the night, believing that mastering the math of flight angles was her ticket skyward. Her friendships sometimes suffered. Sleepovers and parties took a backseat to flight simulators on her aging computer. She joined online forums where pilots, both aspiring and retired, traded tips. She practiced on free software until she could execute virtual takeoffs and landings without a hitch. Her peers didn't understand. "Why don't you just relax?" they asked. "Why work so hard for something that probably won't happen?" Emma never explained. How could she? They hadn't felt what she felt at that air show, something raw and undeniable. One autumn afternoon, as she jogged home from school, Emma stopped dead in her tracks. Above, a formation of jets streaked across the horizon, low and fast, their roar vibrating in her chest. She dropped her backpack and stared until they vanished. The sight didn't just excite her. It hurt, like an ache in her ribs. She whispered aloud, "That's where I belong." Passers-by gave her odd looks, but she didn't care. Her first chance to truly touch the sky came at 17. Using money saved from babysitting and tutoring, she booked a discovery flight at the local airport. The instructor, a weathered man with silver hair, welcomed her warmly. "Ready to see the world from up there?" he asked. Her hands trembled as she buckled into the small Cessna 172. When the engine roared to life, Emma's heart raced. As the wheels lifted off the ground, the city below shrank, roads winding like ribbons, houses like scattered toys. Tears blurred her vision. This wasn't a dream anymore. It was real, and it was hers. "Take the controls," the instructor said, smiling. Emma hesitated, then gripped the yoke. The aircraft responded instantly, banking slightly under her touch. She gasped. The power was intoxicating. "You've got a natural feel," the instructor remarked. She nodded mutely, unable to speak. For the next 30 minutes, she floated, dipped, and turned with careful precision, her confidence growing. When they landed, she stumbled out of the plane, legs shaky. She looked back at the Cessna, her pulse still racing. In that moment, she knew she would spend the rest of her life chasing that feeling. But dreams were fragile things. The cost of flying lessons was staggering, and her family's budget was tight. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father's mechanic salary barely covered bills. Emma couldn't bear to burden them. So she worked, waiting tables at a diner, tutoring younger students, even cleaning hangars at the airport. Every dollar saved brought her closer to the cockpit. She kept a jar on her desk labeled Flight Fund, and each night she dropped in a few crumpled bills. Progress was slow, but the jar filled steadily, a symbol of her unrelenting resolve. As graduation approached, Emma applied for the Air Force Academy. Her essays overflowed with passion. Her recommendations were glowing. Her physical test scores were outstanding. She felt ready. On the day she mailed her application, she lingered at the post office box, whispering a prayer. She imagined the future, marching in uniform, earning her wings, climbing into a jet that roared like the ones from her childhood. Her heart swelled. The waiting was agony. Weeks turned into months. Every day she rushed to the mailbox, pulse quickening at the sight of official envelopes. Her friends received acceptance letters to universities and celebrated. Emma waited. Finally, one crisp spring afternoon, the envelope arrived thin, unpromising. She tore it open with trembling hands. The words stabbed like ice. "We regret to inform you." Her knees buckled. She sank onto the porch, the letter fluttering in her lap. Tears blurred her vision, but anger rose to meet them. She read the words again. Pilot suitability standards. What did that even mean? She knew her scores. She knew her abilities. This wasn't about aptitude. It was about perception. About bias. About being told she didn't belong in the very place her heart had lived since she was 4 years old. Her father found her there, shoulders shaking, fists gripping the paper. He sat beside her silently, letting the moment breathe. Finally, he spoke. "Emma, listen to me. They don't get to decide who you are. They don't get to kill your dream. You hear me?" She nodded weakly, though her chest still ached. "Then prove them wrong," he said firmly. "Find another way." That night, Emma tacked the rejection letter above her desk. Instead of hiding it, she framed it as fuel. Every time she studied, every time exhaustion tempted her, she looked at those cold words and felt the fire return. They thought she wasn't suitable? Fine. She would redefine suitability. Emma Sanchez had been told no, but no was not the end. It was only the beginning. The letter sat on her lap like a stone, its thinness mocking her. Emma had imagined this moment so many times, but never like this. She had rehearsed how it would feel to rip open the envelope, eyes racing across the page to the word congratulations. She had pictured herself sprinting into the kitchen, waving the letter at her parents, shouting, "I'm in." Instead, her eyes locked on a phrase she could barely process. "We regret to inform you." She read it once, twice, a third time, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something else. They didn't. The sting wasn't in the rejection itself. Plenty of applicants were turned down. The ache came from the reason: pilot suitability standards. She had aced her academics, nailed the physical tests, passed the interviews. Suitability? What did that even mean? To Emma, it sounded like a thinly veiled way of saying you don't belong here. Her fingers crumpled the paper before she stopped herself. No, she thought. She needed to keep it. She needed to remember this moment. Carefully, she flattened it again, her tears blotting the ink in places. The door creaked open. Her father stepped onto the porch, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. One look at her face told him everything. He sat beside her, silent, the scent of oil and sweat clinging to his shirt. He didn't pry, didn't ask. He just waited. Finally, she handed him the letter. His eyes scanned the page, jaw tightening. "Suitability," he muttered, almost spitting the word. He shook his head. "That's not about you. That's about them." Emma swallowed hard. "I did everything right, Dad. Everything." "I know you did." He placed the rag on his knee. "Sometimes the world doesn't want to see you win. But that doesn't mean you stop. You hear me? You don't stop." The conviction in his voice steadied her, but only a little. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at the letter pinned above her lamp. Every time she looked at it, a storm churned inside her. Anger, sadness, confusion, shame. She wanted to burn it, to shred it into dust. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. This wasn't just a rejection. It was a challenge. The next few weeks blurred together. Her friends celebrated their college acceptance letters, posing for photos in new university sweatshirts. Emma forced a smile, but jealousy burned beneath it. At graduation, when her classmates announced their futures engineering, medicine, law, she felt a hollow space where her dream should have been. "You'll figure it out," her best friend Maria told her, squeezing her hand. "Maybe this is a sign you're meant to do something else." Something else. The phrase grated. Emma didn't want something else. She wanted the sky. At the diner where she worked part-time, coworkers noticed her slump. During late-night shifts, as coffee cups clinked and the jukebox hummed old country songs, they tried to cheer her up. "You're young," one said. "Plenty of time to decide what you want." Emma nodded politely, though inside she screamed, "I already know what I want. They just won't let me have it." Her mother tried a gentler approach. "Mia, maybe they're protecting you," she said one evening, setting a plate of enchiladas on the table. "Flying jets. It's dangerous, exhausting. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise." Emma pushed her food around her plate. "It's not a blessing. It's a wall. And I'm not stopping at the wall." Her mother sighed, brushing Emma's hair back from her face. "Then you'll need to climb it." The frustration boiled over one night when Emma confronted the rejection head-on. She opened her laptop and searched forums for others who had been turned away from pilot training. The stories were eerily similar. Women and minorities quietly pushed aside under vague standards. Some had reapplied. Others had given up. Emma refused to join either group. She bookmarked every resource, every alternative path, every civilian program. If the Air Force didn't want her the first time, she would find another way. Still, the sting lingered. She remembered sitting in her high school gym when recruiters had visited, telling students about opportunities. The officer in the crisp uniform had smiled at her when she asked about becoming a fighter pilot. "It's tough," he had said, almost dismissively. Not everyone's cut out for it. At the time, she had brushed it off. Now, she wondered if he had already decided she didn't belong before she even applied. One night, unable to sleep, Emma crept into the garage. Her father's toolbox lay open, wrenches and screwdrivers gleaming under the dim light. On the shelf sat an old model airplane they had built together years earlier, its paint chipped but wings intact. She picked it up, running her thumb along the fuselage. The memories flooded back, her father's steady hands guiding hers, the smell of glue, the way she had whispered, "Someday I'll fly the real thing." She clenched the model tightly. They can't take this from me, she thought. Not this dream, not ever. The rejection letter became more than a reminder. It became her fuel. She studied it until the words lost meaning, until suitability felt laughable. She taped it next to her computer monitor, beside sticky notes covered in formulas and flight terms. Each morning, when exhaustion threatened to keep her in bed, she looked at it and rose anyway. Each night, when doubt whispered that she was wasting her time, she glared at the letter until anger silenced the voice. Her friends noticed the change. "You're more intense than ever," Maria said one afternoon as they walked through town. Most people would take that kind of rejection as a sign to move on. Emma smirked. "Most people aren't me." The fire in her eyes unsettled even Maria, but it inspired others. A younger cousin confessed that she wanted to become an engineer, but was afraid of failing. "If they tell you no," Emma told her, "that doesn't mean you stop. It means you fight harder." Her cousin smiled, emboldened. In that moment, Emma realized her journey wasn't just about her. It was about everyone told they weren't suitable, weren't capable, weren't enough. By summer, the pain of rejection had hardened into resolve. She took extra shifts at the diner, pouring coffee for truckers at 2 a.m., her tips stuffed into the flight fund jar. She enrolled in night classes at the community college, determined to sharpen her math and engineering skills. When exhaustion pressed down on her, she imagined herself in a cockpit, gripping the controls, the roar of the engine drowning out doubt. Her path wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. The Air Force hadn't ended her dream. They had only lit the fuse. Emma Sanchez had been rejected, but she wasn't defeated. She was just getting started. The rejection letter might have ended the story for someone else, but for Emma Sanchez, it became a compass. She taped it above her desk, not as a wound, but as a reminder. Every morning she woke up and saw those cold words, "not suitable." And every morning she whispered the same reply, "Watch me." Her first step came through the small municipal airport, 20 miles from home. It was no gleaming military base, just a cracked runway surrounded by weathered hangars, and a flight school office that smelled of coffee and engine oil. Emma walked in one humid June morning, her savings folded into an envelope. The receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes, looked at her curiously when Emma asked about lessons. "You've flown before?" The woman asked. "Just a discovery flight," Emma said. "But I want to learn. I need to learn." The woman smiled and slid a pamphlet across the counter. "Then welcome to the skies, honey. We'll start you in a Cessna." The price tag was daunting. Even the cheapest lessons cost more than she made in a week of diner shifts. But Emma refused to flinch. She handed over the envelope, every dollar she had saved from tips and tutoring, and scheduled her first class. Her instructor was a wiry man named Doug, with a sunburned nose and a voice like gravel. He had flown crop dusters in Kansas before moving into instruction. At first, he regarded Emma with skepticism. "You serious about this?" he asked, squinting at her as they stood beside the Cessna. Emma met his gaze steadily. "More serious than anything in my life," he shrugged. "We'll see." From the first lesson, Emma devoured everything. She memorized checklists, studied manuals late into the night, and peppered Doug with questions that made him raise his eyebrows. While other students struggled to grasp basic maneuvers, Emma seemed to feel the aircraft as an extension of herself. Her first solo flight came sooner than expected. As she taxied down the runway alone, heart hammering, she whispered, "This is it." When the plane lifted into the sky, her nerves melted into pure joy. But flying came at a cost. Her savings evaporated quickly. To pay for lessons, Emma took on every job she could find. She scrubbed floors at the airport hangars, wiped grease from tools, and even helped refuel aircraft. At the diner, she picked up double shifts, serving coffee to weary truckers who tipped quarters. At night, she tutored high school students in math, her eyes heavy but her voice steady. Every crumpled bill went into the jar labeled Flight Fund. Her parents worried. "Mia, you're exhausting yourself," her mother said one evening as Emma staggered through the door, smelling of coffee and jet fuel. "I can rest when I'm in the sky," Emma replied, collapsing onto the couch. Her father only nodded. He saw in her the same fire he'd once carried as a young mechanic dreaming of bigger things. "Keep climbing," he told her. "Don't stop." Word spread around the flight school about the young woman who worked like a machine to pay for lessons. Some of the older pilots teased her, calling her the midnight student, but others respected her grit. One retired Air Force pilot, Captain Reynolds, took a special interest in her. After watching her land a Cessna flawlessly in heavy crosswinds, he approached her with a grin. "You ever think about flying something faster?" he asked. Emma's eyes lit up. "Every day," Reynolds chuckled. "I can't promise you a jet, but I can give you extra time in the simulator. Come by after hours." Those after-hours sessions became sacred. In the dim glow of the simulator screens, Emma practiced advanced maneuvers, simulated emergencies, and precision landings. Reynolds pushed her harder than Doug did, barking instructions, demanding perfection. Again, he would shout when she made the slightest error. Emma never complained. She thrived under the pressure. Yet for all her progress, doubt still crept in. One evening, as she stared at her dwindling savings, fatigue finally cracked her armor. "What if I'm just chasing something impossible?" she whispered to herself. The rejection letter loomed on her wall, its words cutting deeper in the quiet. The next morning, during a lesson, her frustration boiled over. She botched a landing, slamming the Cessna onto the runway with a jolt. Doug cursed, gripping the controls. "What the hell was that, Sanchez? You're better than this." Emma's eyes stung. Maybe I'm not. Maybe they were right. Doug pulled the plane to a stop and turned to her. His usual gruffness softened. "Listen, kid. The sky doesn't hand out favors. It doesn't care if you're man or woman, rich or poor. It only cares if you show up and fight for it. You've got the guts. Don't waste them." The words hit her harder than the botched landing. She nodded, determination reigniting. Over the months, Emma's reputation grew. By her 20th birthday, she had logged more hours than most of her peers and earned her private pilot's license. When she held the certificate in her hands, she thought back to the rejection letter. One flimsy sheet of paper had tried to tell her who she was. Now another, signed and sealed, told the truth. Emma Sanchez was a pilot. The milestone didn't erase the sting of rejection, but it reshaped it. She no longer saw herself as someone begging for permission to fly. She was someone who had claimed the sky on her own terms. Each time she lifted off, she whispered, "This is mine." Still, she hungered for more. Cessnas were only the beginning. She wanted jets, speed, and the raw power of advanced aircraft. But to reach that level, she needed money, connections, and opportunities that felt impossibly distant. That's when fate intervened. One evening, as she finished wiping down tables at the diner, a man in a pressed shirt struck up a conversation. He was a contractor working with a defense company, and he had noticed the flight manuals tucked into her bag. "You're a pilot?" he asked. "Working on it," Emma replied cautiously. He smiled. "We're always looking for people who know their way around aviation. Not as pilots, not yet, but in technical roles. You'd learn a lot. Interested?" Emma hesitated only a moment. This wasn't the cockpit of a fighter jet, but it was closer to the world she craved. And if there was one thing she had learned, it was that every detour could become a runway. That night, she filled out the application. As she typed, her eyes flicked to the rejection letter still pinned above her desk. She didn't feel the old ache anymore. Instead, she felt something sharper. Resolve. They had called her unsuitable. Now, she was about to step into their world anyway. Emma Sanchez was still climbing. The defense contractor's office was nothing like the municipal airport or the flight school hangars. It was stark and sterile, walls lined with computer screens and technical diagrams of aircraft Emma had only seen in magazines. For someone who had spent her teenage years chasing the roar of Cessna engines, the hum of fluorescent lights and whirring of servers was almost alien. Yet the first time she walked through the doors, her heart leapt. This was a step closer to the sky she had always dreamed of, even if it wasn't the cockpit just yet. Her supervisor, Mr. Langley, was a middle-aged engineer with a meticulous mind and a dry wit. He had noticed her persistence, her encyclopedic knowledge of aircraft, and her unusual determination. "We're not hiring pilots," he said the first day. "But if you know systems, if you can troubleshoot and understand the aircraft from the inside out, there's a place for you here. Can you do that?" Emma's eyes sparkled. Absolutely. Her work began with manuals, wiring schematics, and simulation data. She quickly absorbed the technical jargon that bewildered her colleagues. By day, she annotated maintenance logs and compiled performance reports. By night, she studied advanced fighter jet systems in her apartment, memorizing sensor arrays, avionics, and stealth capabilities. It was obsessive work, but obsession had always been her fuel. In the first few weeks, she faced ridicule from some colleagues. Why is she even here? They muttered when she asked detailed questions about flight control systems. Some thought she was too young. Others assumed she lacked real experience. Emma ignored them. She spent long hours in the lab, running simulations on her own time, cross-referencing data, and demonstrating a level of expertise that few expected. Her presence became impossible to overlook. Captain Reynolds, the retired Air Force pilot who had mentored her during civilian lessons, stopped by one afternoon. He leaned against a console, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his face. "You're really overachieving, aren't you?" Emma smiled, though exhaustion tugged at her. "I don't want to be good enough. I want to be exceptional." He laughed softly. "Good answer. Most people would quit after one rejection letter. You're not most people." Her expertise grew quickly. Emma became the unofficial expert on F-35 systems among her small team. She could explain sensor calibrations, predict software behavior, and troubleshoot avionics with a speed and accuracy that impressed her supervisors. One engineer muttered under his breath, "How does a 20-year-old know this much?" But when the team needed answers, Emma was the one they turned to. The real turning point came when the contractor arranged for her to observe a live F-35 on the tarmac. Emma's heart raced as she approached the sleek aircraft. Its angular design seemed almost predatory, a stark contrast to the friendly, rounded lines of the Cessna she had flown for years. She traced her fingers along the fuselage, careful not to touch the sensitive panels, memorizing every contour. She had studied manuals, simulations, and technical diagrams. But this, the real thing, was intoxicating. Mr. Langley approached her quietly. "You know this inside and out," he said. "I didn't think someone your age could absorb this level of complexity." Emma swallowed hard. "I've been preparing for this my whole life. You may be right about that," he replied, watching her gaze linger on the cockpit. Though she wasn't allowed inside yet, Emma was granted time in the simulator. It was a first taste of flying an F-35, though virtually. Her hands gripped the controls, her eyes darted across the panels. Every maneuver, every simulated emergency, she executed with precision. The instructor supervising her smirked. "You're exceptional," he said finally, unable to hide his surprise. Months passed, and Emma's name circulated quietly through the contractor's network. She was no longer just the kid who wants to fly. She was a critical member of the team, someone who could anticipate technical problems before they arose. Her proficiency made her a symbol of potential in a system that had overlooked her for years. Yet the sting of rejection still lingered. Every time she saw an official military pilot pass by, her chest tightened. She was here, but not there, not yet in the cockpit of her own jet. That frustration, though, became fuel. She worked longer hours, studied harder, and volunteered for tasks that others avoided. The nights were long, sometimes stretching into dawn, but the thrill of each small victory, of mastering a new subsystem or running a flawless simulation, made her blood hum. Her parents noticed the change. When she called home late one night to report another breakthrough, her father's voice was calm but proud. "You're doing it, Mia," he said. "You're finally inside the door." Emma smiled, a mixture of fatigue and satisfaction. "Inside the door," she echoed. "But the cockpit, that's still out there." Then came the day that shifted everything. The contractor announced a special program for technical experts to transition into operational, testing a rare opportunity to work closely with pilots and learn systems hands-on. Emma applied immediately. Her supervisors, familiar with her unmatched dedication, recommended her without hesitation. When she received the acceptance notice, she allowed herself a small, victorious smile. Years of tireless study, relentless work, and quiet determination were paying off. In the following weeks, Emma's life became a blur of simulations, test flights, and system troubleshooting. Every day was a challenge. Every mistake carried weight. And yet, despite the intensity, she felt closer than ever to her childhood dream. Sitting in the simulator, flying virtual missions with precision, she felt the sky respond to her as though it remembered her from that first airshow years ago. Her colleagues began to notice subtle changes in the way they interacted with her. The same engineers who once whispered doubts now sought her opinions. "Emma," one said, "can you run the diagnostics on this before the pilots get here? You'll catch something they might miss." She smiled quietly, letting her work speak louder than words ever could. But the true test came when she was invited to sit in the cockpit, not to fly, not yet, but to familiarize herself with the controls under the watchful eye of a certified instructor. Heart pounding, she climbed into the jet. The seat hugged her, the controls familiar, yet more complex than any aircraft she had touched before. For the first time, she felt a whisper of what it would be like to fly not in simulations, not in small planes, but in the instrumented, screaming heart of a fighter jet. The instructor watched her as she ran through pre-flight checks. "You know this better than most pilots do," he admitted, shaking his head in disbelief. "Most people wouldn't notice half of the alerts you just identified." Emma exhaled, a mixture of pride and disbelief. Years of rejection, of late nights, of relentless study had brought her here. She was inside the world she had been denied, touching the controls she had dreamed of, and proving at last that her skills, knowledge, and determination could not be ignored. As she climbed out of the cockpit that day, she felt a quiet triumph. The Air Force had once said she was unsuitable. Now, a defense contractor, pilots, and engineers alike acknowledged her brilliance. She wasn't flying combat missions yet, but she was inside the gates, learning, preparing, growing. And as she walked back to her office, eyes on the sunset, she whispered a vow she had carried for years. Soon, very soon, I will fly. The simulator room smelled of electronics and polished metal, a hum of machinery vibrating through the floor. It was a far cry from the open skies she had known in Cessnas, but Emma Sanchez could feel the air shift even in a controlled environment. This was no ordinary training session. It was her first chance to prove herself to the very people who had once deemed her unfit. Every detail mattered. Every calculation, every maneuver, every mental check could make or break her future. She stepped inside, the F-35 simulator looming like a predatory bird. Its sleek panels gleamed under the fluorescent lights, the cockpit a labyrinth of switches, dials and screens. The instructors assigned to supervise her were skeptical. Their expressions were polite, neutral, but Emma recognized the subtle undercurrent of doubt. Most had never expected a 20-year-old civilian, let alone a woman, to handle this level of technical and operational complexity. "Good luck, Sanchez," one said, adjusting the headset over his ears. "Try not to embarrass yourself." Emma ignored the jab. Inside, her pulse raced, but her hands were steady. She had been preparing for this moment for years through Cessnas, late-night simulations, and meticulous study of manuals and avionics. She had memorized emergency procedures, flight paths, weapon systems, and sensor arrays. Every detail mattered, and she had left nothing to chance. The simulation began with a routine flight scenario. Takeoff, ascent, navigation to simulated airspace. Emma gripped the controls and felt a thrill she hadn't experienced since her first solo flight in a small plane. Everything was faster here, more precise, more demanding. She banked sharply, adjusting for wind in the virtual environment, and guided the aircraft smoothly through an intricate series of maneuvers. The instructors exchanged glances. One muttered, "Not bad for a civilian." Emma ignored them, focusing on the next challenge. A simulated reconnaissance mission over hostile territory. Radar blips appeared on her screens, signaling potential threats. She calculated trajectories, adjusted altitudes, and deployed countermeasures all in rapid succession. The simulator responded perfectly, as though it recognized the precision of her commands. "Speed up!" The lead instructor barked, injecting a sudden crisis. Missiles incoming. Evasive maneuvers now. Emma's mind worked on autopilot. Years of studying flight manuals merged with instinct honed through real piloting experience. She executed a series of rolls, dives, and evasive patterns, navigating her aircraft flawlessly through the simulated attack. Her hands moved with the fluidity of a concert pianist, every motion deliberate, every calculation precise. The room was silent, except for the mechanical hum of the simulator. Even the skeptical instructors couldn't hide their awe. "She's handling it," one whispered almost to himself. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the exercise ended. Emma guided the F-35 back to a simulated landing strip, executing a textbook touchdown. The cockpit lights dimmed, the simulator powered down, and she exhaled, a mixture of relief and triumph flooding her. The instructors approached. The lead instructor, a man who had doubted her from the start, adjusted his glasses and studied her. "Sanchez, your performance was exceptional," he said, voice tight with restrained admiration. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle that sequence with such precision, let alone someone outside of military training." Emma allowed herself a small, victorious smile. Years of rejection, struggle, and relentless effort had brought her to this room, to this moment. She had proven first to herself, then to the skeptics, that she could perform at a level far beyond expectations. But the simulation was only the beginning. Next came complex combat scenarios, high-stress exercises designed to test decision-making under pressure. Missiles, enemy aircraft, and technical malfunctions were thrown at her simultaneously. Many experienced pilots had struggled with these exercises. Emma, however, excelled. Her meticulous preparation, combined with her real-world piloting experience, allowed her to anticipate problems before they arose. Every action was precise, every maneuver calculated. Hours passed. She lost track of time, caught in the rhythm of the machine and the exhilaration of mastery. The instructors observed in awe as she completed each scenario flawlessly, adjusting to every sudden challenge. By the end of the day, even the most skeptical among them had to admit it. Emma Sanchez was extraordinary. "Congratulations, Sanchez," the lead instructor said, finally offering a smile that was genuine. "You've earned more than a passing grade. You've earned our respect." For Emma, respect was only a small part of the victory. The real triumph was validation. All the late nights, all the discarded paychecks, all the ridicule and doubt, they had not been in vain. She had climbed the wall that had once seemed insurmountable and reached the top. That evening, as she stepped out of the simulator building, the sun was setting in brilliant streaks of orange and pink. She inhaled deeply, letting the colors wash over her. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging, a connection not just to the aircraft she had studied, but to the dream that had driven her since childhood. Captain Reynolds was waiting outside, leaning casually against a truck. "I saw the report," he said, voice tinged with pride. "You really blew them away, didn't you?" Emma laughed, a sound full of relief and triumph. "I didn't just blow them away," she said. "I proved they were wrong." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers with approval. "Exactly. And now, Sanchez, you're on a new trajectory. One that could lead you where you've always wanted to go." Emma's pulse quickened. The words carried weight. This wasn't just about technical mastery anymore. This was about opportunity. The path that had been closed to her, because of bias, because of rejection, was beginning to open. She had earned her place. Over the next few weeks, her reputation grew rapidly. Colleagues who had once doubted her sought her out for guidance. Pilots, intrigued by her expertise in simulator performance, began to invite her to observe operational exercises. Emma watched closely, absorbing every detail of tactical maneuvers and decision-making under pressure. She took meticulous notes, studied the pilot's techniques, and practiced simulations relentlessly to match and exceed their skill. She began to understand the language of military aviation, not just in theory, but in practice, the split-second decisions, the instinctive reactions, the integration of technology and human judgment. Her knowledge was no longer academic. It was operational, tested, and validated. And through it all, Emma never lost sight of her ultimate goal, the cockpit. Every simulation, every observation, every technical challenge was a stepping stone toward flying the aircraft she had dreamed of since childhood. She visualized herself climbing into the real F-35, feeling the engines roar beneath her, and commanding the sky with skill and precision. The turning point had arrived. Emma Sanchez was no longer a civilian student, no longer a rejected applicant. She had become a force to be reckoned with, a pilot in spirit and expertise. The world that had dismissed her now had to acknowledge her talent. And deep inside, she knew the moment would come when she could finally take control of the aircraft herself. The journey was far from over, but the trajectory was clear. From rejection to relentless pursuit, from small planes to advanced simulations, Emma had proven that determination, preparation, and skill could overcome bias and doubt. She had turned the door that had been closed in her face into a gateway, and nothing would stop her now. As she left the simulator that evening, Emma looked up at the sky, streaked with twilight colors. Her hands flexed instinctively, as though reaching for the controls of a plane just beyond reach. A smile spread across her face. Soon, she thought. Very soon, I will fly. The announcement came quietly, almost unceremoniously. Emma Sanchez had been accepted into a special pilot training program designed for exceptional candidates with technical expertise. It was a chance that few civilians ever received, and even fewer women had accessed. The moment she received the official email, her hands trembled. Years of struggle, late nights, and unrelenting dedication had brought her to this threshold. The Air Force, which once told her she was unsuitable, had now opened the gate. The first day of training was a whirlwind of orientation, medical evaluations, and introductions. She stepped onto the tarmac and felt the roar of aircraft engines vibrate through the soles of her boots. Cadets moved quickly, their uniforms crisp, their confidence palpable. Some shot her skeptical glances, whispering about her unconventional entry. She ignored them. She had faced doubt before. This was nothing new. The instructors were equally cautious. You've got skill, one of them admitted privately, but this isn't just about knowledge. It's about endurance, teamwork, and quick thinking under stress. Emma nodded, a flicker of determination lighting her eyes. She didn't just want to succeed, she wanted to excel. Training began in earnest. The first few days tested everything Emma had ever learned. Physical endurance, mental acuity, navigation exercises, and simulator flights that rivaled the complexity of real missions. Her classmates, some seasoned military cadets, struggled to adapt to the intensity. Emma thrived. Years of late-night study, Cessna flights, and defense contractor simulations had prepared her for every challenge. The first major exercise was a simulated dogfight in an advanced flight simulator. Enemy aircraft blips lit the radar, and cadets were expected to anticipate maneuvers, evade attacks, and strike with precision. Many faltered, hesitating or miscalculating. Emma executed each maneuver flawlessly, predicting the opponent's patterns before they occurred. The instructors exchanged astonished looks. By the end of the exercise, she had outperformed nearly every cadet, leaving a trail of awe and grudging respect. Her peers could no longer ignore her skill. Some approached her with curiosity, others with resentment. A cadet named Marcus, a confident pilot in training, finally confronted her during a break. "You're good," he admitted reluctantly. "I'll give you that. But do you really belong here?" Emma met his gaze calmly. "I belong wherever I work hard enough to earn it," she replied. "And I've been working harder than anyone here," Marcus grunted, clearly unsettled, but he didn't argue further. Gradually, other cadets began to recognize that Emma's presence wasn't a fluke. It was the result of years of preparation, skill, and unshakable determination. She was no longer the outsider, they were now competing with her. The program tested endurance as well as skill. Early mornings began before sunrise, with rigorous physical drills designed to push cadets to their limits. Emma ran laps, lifted weights, and performed obstacle courses with precision, often finishing ahead of the majority. Fatigue clawed at her muscles, but she welcomed it. Every drop of sweat was a reminder that she was no longer defined by rejection. She was defined by resilience. Classroom sessions were equally demanding. Flight theory, aerodynamics, avionics, and mission strategy were taught at an accelerated pace. Instructors frequently challenged her, probing her knowledge and expecting immediate recall. Emma answered each question with clarity, sometimes referencing technical details that left her classmates scrambling for notes. Her reputation as the cadet who already knew everything spread quickly. The true test came during live flight exercises. Climbing into a training jet for the first time, Emma felt the familiar thrill of engines igniting beneath her. The controls were more complex than the Cessna, faster and less forgiving. Every maneuver required split-second decision-making. She navigated through simulated combat zones, executed tight turns, and coordinated with other cadets with precision that impressed even the most critical instructors. One instructor, Colonel Hayes, observed her closely during an advanced flight exercise. After landing, he approached her. "Sanchez, your technique is impeccable. Your timing, your awareness. Most cadets struggle with this level of multitasking. You've got talent most can only dream of." Emma exhaled, a mixture of relief and pride. Years of preparation, study, and relentless practice were finally being validated. For the first time, she felt fully recognized for her abilities. The weeks turned into months, and Emma continued to excel. She mastered complex aerial maneuvers, precision landings, and tactical coordination exercises. Each success built her confidence and reputation. By the halfway point of the training program, she was consistently at the top of her class, outperforming cadets who had years of conventional experience. Yet she remained humble. She knew the journey was far from over. Each exercise, each evaluation, was another step toward the ultimate goal, piloting an operational F-35. She used her knowledge to help others, offering guidance to struggling cadets and sharing techniques she had honed through years of personal study. Slowly, the camaraderie that had been absent in the beginning began to take shape. Breaking the barrier wasn't just about skill. It was about perception. Cadets and instructors who had once questioned her presence now looked to her for expertise and leadership. Emma's combination of technical mastery, instinctive flying skill, and resilience became undeniable. The very system that had once rejected her now relied on her. The culminating exercise of this phase of training was a simulated joint mission. Cadets had to coordinate with multiple aircraft, navigate through simulated hostile territory, and execute objectives under strict time constraints. Emma's team initially struggled to synchronize, but she remained calm, issuing clear instructions and anticipating potential issues before they arose. Under her guidance, the team executed the mission flawlessly. When the debriefing concluded, Colonel Hayes addressed the group. "There are cadets among you who have demonstrated exceptional skill and leadership," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. "One of them has redefined expectations for what's possible. Cadet Sanchez, congratulations. You've set a new standard." Emma felt a rush of satisfaction, tempered by the memory of the rejection letter still pinned above her desk at home. That small piece of paper had once threatened to define her. Now, she had not only entered the pilot program, she had excelled in a way few could match. As she walked off the tarmac that evening, the sky streaked with hues of gold and crimson, Emma's mind raced. The barriers of bias and doubt had been shattered, but the ultimate test remained. She still had to step into the cockpit of an operational F-35 to command the aircraft she had dreamed about since childhood. Yet for the first time, she felt that it wasn't a question of if, but when. She had broken the barrier, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And as the wind swept across the open field, tugging at her flight jacket, she whispered to herself, "I am ready." Every late night, every ounce of sweat, every sacrifice had led her here. Emma Sanchez had proven that determination, skill, and resilience could overcome doubt, discrimination, and obstacles. The Air Force had once rejected her. Now she had earned a place, and she intended to soar. The day Emma Sanchez had been preparing for her entire life finally arrived. She stood on the tarmac, the F-35 before her gleaming under the harsh sunlight. Its angular, sleek frame seemed alive, almost predatory, and Emma felt a surge of adrenaline unlike anything she had experienced before. She adjusted her flight suit, tightened her gloves, and ran through the checklist that had become second nature after countless simulations and training exercises. Every switch, every dial, Every indicator was familiar, yet nothing could replicate the reality of the jet beneath her hands. The instructors observed silently, and even Captain Reynolds, who had followed her career since her first civilian lessons, remained reserved, knowing the magnitude of what lay ahead. Today was no simulation. Today was real, and every decision Emma made would have consequences she could not undo with the press of a reset button. The mission briefing had been intense. A simulated enemy infiltration had been detected along a high-risk training corridor. Emma's team would navigate the corridor, intercept threats, and execute strategic maneuvers with precision. Lives weren't at risk, but the stakes were enough to test every ounce of skill and resolve she possessed. Climbing into the cockpit, Emma felt the familiar pulse of engines, now magnified 100-fold. The F-35's canopy enveloped her. The instrument panel a dizzying array of data feeds, sensors, and tactical readouts. She inhaled deeply, centering herself. Years of rejection, struggle, and perseverance had led to this moment. She was ready. The engines roared to life, shaking the tarmac beneath her. As the aircraft lifted smoothly into the sky, Emma felt the familiar exhilaration she had experienced in Cessnas and simulators, but magnified, electrified, almost sacred. The wind roared past her ears, the ground shrinking rapidly beneath her. She was airborne in a fighter jet that only a few dozen civilians had ever touched, let alone piloted with such confidence. The first segment of the mission required precision navigation. Enemy radar signatures lit the instruments, signaling potential threats. Emma adjusted altitude and heading, anticipating every scenario before it could unfold. She felt her body and mind become one with the aircraft, every input executed with exacting precision. Suddenly, the mission escalated. Enemy drones simulated an unexpected attack. Missiles locked onto her team, and rapid evasive action was required. Emma reacted instinctively, recalling every high-stress simulation she had endured. She executed a series of high-G maneuvers, rolling and diving with the precision of a seasoned combat pilot. Her team followed her lead, coordinating their moves through radio communications. Every decision Emma made was measured and deliberate. When a simulated engine anomaly occurred in one aircraft, she guided the pilot through a rapid corrective procedure, preventing disaster. The instructors monitoring the mission were visibly impressed, leaning forward in disbelief as Emma managed multiple crises simultaneously. Captain Reynolds, watching remotely, allowed himself a rare smile. He had trained countless pilots in his career, but few had the combination of technical knowledge, instinct, and sheer courage that Emma displayed. This was no longer a student exercise. It was a demonstration of mastery. Midway through the mission, the simulation introduced a final, unexpected challenge, a hostile radar sweep requiring a low-altitude penetration and rapid extraction. Emma adjusted her trajectory, calculating angles, speed, and fuel efficiency in real time. The jet responded flawlessly, and she guided her team through the corridor with precision. Every maneuver was executed as planned, yet the tension remained high. The simulation pushed her to the absolute limits of concentration. When the mission concluded, the F-35 touched down with textbook precision. Emma exhaled, heart pounding, as instructors and her team erupted in applause. The skepticism and doubt that had followed her for years evaporated in that moment. She had done more than succeed. She had excelled, proving that the skill, determination, and intelligence she had honed for years were more than enough to command the most advanced aircraft in the sky. The debriefing was filled with commendations. Cadet Sanchez, the lead instructor said, his voice filled with respect, "Your performance today was extraordinary. You demonstrated composure, strategic insight, and technical expertise under extreme pressure. You've set a new standard for what is possible." Emma listened quietly, allowing herself a moment to savor the triumph. It was more than validation. It was a turning point. The Air Force had once deemed her unsuitable. Today, she had not only proven her worth, she had redefined it. Captain Reynolds approached her afterward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I always knew you could do it," he said quietly. "But even I'm impressed by just how far you've come." Emma smiled, though fatigue and exhilaration were etched into her face. "It's more than just me," she said. "It's everyone who didn't give up on me, everyone who believed I could do this." As the sun set behind the mountains, Emma reflected on her journey. From a 4-year-old staring at F-16s in awe, to a rejected applicant, to a civilian pilot mastering complex simulations, and now finally piloting an F-35 herself, she had defied expectation after expectation. Every obstacle, every doubt, every late night of study and labor had been a step toward this triumph. The F-35 mission wasn't just a personal victory. It was a symbolic one. It proved that determination, skill, and resilience could overcome bias, rejection, and systemic obstacles. It was the moment that cemented Emma's place among the elite, a tangible achievement that no one could deny. Yet even in triumph, Emma's mind raced forward. She knew this was not the end. More missions, more challenges, more opportunities to test herself awaited. But for the first time, she felt truly empowered, fully capable, and unafraid to embrace the sky on her terms. As she climbed out of the cockpit, the wind tugging at her flight suit and helmet, she looked up at the deepening twilight sky. For years, she had been told she wasn't suitable, that her dreams were impossible. Now, standing beside the aircraft she had once only imagined, Emma felt a surge of pride and promise. She had not only flown the F-35, she had commanded it, conquered its challenges, and proved herself undeniable. The mission was complete, but Emma knew one thing with certainty. The sky was hers to claim. Every rejection, every obstacle, every doubt that had tried to hold her back had been transformed into fuel. And as she gazed at the horizon, a new determination settled in her chest. She would continue to fly, to excel, and to inspire, showing the world that limits existed only where courage and resolve failed. Emma Sanchez had reached the cockpit, but more importantly, she had shown that nothing, not bias, not doubt, not rejection, could ever clip the wings of someone determined to soar. The sky had become Emma Sanchez's domain. Every flight, every maneuver, every mission confirmed what she had always known. She belonged here. From the rejection letter that once tore at her dreams to the roaring engines of the F-35 beneath her, her journey had been a testament to relentless determination, skill, and resilience. But the journey wasn't just about her, it was about every person who had been told they were unsuitable, unqualified, or not enough. After months of operational missions and advanced flight exercises, Emma had earned a place among the elite pilots in her squadron. Her peers no longer regarded her with skepticism. They respected her, relied on her, and often sought her guidance. She had become a benchmark for excellence, someone who transformed obstacles into opportunity. Even those who had doubted her now recognized that her combination of technical mastery, intuition, and courage was unmatched. The first time Emma led a squadron mission without supervision, her hands gripped the controls with confidence. The F-35 responded seamlessly to every adjustment, every command executed with precision. She coordinated her team with calm authority, anticipating threats and challenges with an almost instinctual understanding of aerial combat. When the mission concluded successfully, her squadron erupted in applause over the radio. Emma allowed herself a quiet smile, savoring a moment that once seemed impossible. Back on the ground, her reflection in the cockpit canopy revealed not just a pilot, but a story of triumph over adversity. She thought of the countless hours of study, the late nights at the diner, the simulations, the physical training, and the ceaseless perseverance that had brought her here. Each obstacle had been a test of her resolve, and each victory had been earned through effort and ingenuity. Emma's parents were present at a ceremony marking the squadron's achievements. Her father's eyes glimmered with pride, his hands rough from years of labor, yet gentle as they clutched hers. "You've made every sacrifice worth it," he whispered. Her mother's embrace was filled with warmth and admiration. "We always knew you could do it," she said. "But even we didn't know just how far you would go." For Emma, the most profound reward wasn't accolades or recognition. It was the knowledge that she had redefined what was possible, not just for herself, but for every young woman and marginalized individual who dreamed of the sky. She had broken barriers, shattered expectations, and left a trail for others to follow. Her journey had become a beacon, a story of resilience and determination that could inspire others to reach beyond the limitations imposed upon them. One day, a young cadet approached her at the hangar, eyes wide with admiration and nervousness. I want to fly," the cadet said, voice trembling. "But I've been told I'm not good enough." Emma smiled, recalling the countless whispers of doubt she herself had faced. "Not good enough?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "The sky doesn't care what anyone says. It only cares if you're willing to work, to fight, to learn, and to persevere. If you want it, take it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The cadet's eyes lit up with renewed determination. Emma realized in that moment that her legacy wasn't just measured in flight hours or missions completed. It was measured in the lives she could influence, the dreams she could nurture, and the courage she could instill. Every rejection she had faced, every obstacle she had overcome, had prepared her to mentor and inspire the next generation of pilots. Emma continued to excel, taking on increasingly complex missions, including international exercises that demanded advanced tactical coordination and precision. Each success reinforced her reputation as a pilot of extraordinary skill and composure. Yet she remained humble, knowing that the sky offered endless challenges and that mastery was a journey, not a destination. She also became an advocate for inclusivity in aviation. Speaking at cadet programs and public events, Emma shared her story, emphasizing that talent and dedication were not limited by gender, background, or circumstance. Her words resonated with countless aspiring pilots who had been told they didn't belong. She reminded them that rejection was not failure, it was a challenge to overcome, a call to prove the naysayers wrong. Despite the recognition and admiration, Emma never forgot the small victories that had built the foundation for her success. The first solo flight in a Cessna, the long nights studying aircraft systems, the countless simulations in a darkened room, and the guidance of mentors who had believed in her potential when others had dismissed it. Those moments, seemingly minor at the time, had been the stepping stones to greatness. Even as her career soared, Emma maintained a grounded perspective. She knew that every pilot, no matter how skilled, relied on teamwork, communication, and trust. She fostered a culture of collaboration within her squadron, ensuring that every member felt valued and capable. Her leadership was not just technical. It was moral, inspiring confidence and dedication in those around her. One evening, after a long day of flight exercises, Emma climbed into her F-35 and looked out over the horizon. The sun was setting in a blaze of gold and crimson, the sky stretching endlessly before her. She reflected on her journey, the rejection letter, the relentless training, the technical mastery, the first real flights, and the ultimate mission that had validated her skills. Every obstacle, every hardship, every doubt had shaped her into the pilot she had become. She adjusted the controls, feeling the familiar hum of the aircraft beneath her, and whispered to herself, "I've earned this. Every moment, every struggle, every sacrifice, it's all led me here." She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for her own perseverance, but for the mentors, friends, and family who had supported her along the way. As the aircraft lifted into the evening sky, Emma Sanchez soared with purpose and clarity. She was no longer a young cadet denied entry. She was a force in the skies, a symbol of resilience, courage, and unyielding determination. The barriers of bias and doubt that once loomed over her were now far below, remnants of a past that had only strengthened her resolve. Her legacy was more than her own achievements. It was the inspiration she left for those who came after. Emma knew that countless young dreamers would see her story and believe that they, too, could rise above rejection and defy expectation. Each flight she took was a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of mentorship, and the limitless potential of those willing to pursue their dreams with unwavering dedication. In the fading light, Emma's silhouette against the horizon seemed almost mythic. She had piloted not just an aircraft, but a path for others to follow, a trail through the sky that proved dreams could not be denied. Every heartbeat, every calculation, every skill honed through years of effort was a declaration. Determination could overcome doubt, courage could conquer fear, and talent combined with perseverance could redefine what was possible. As she guided the F-35 through the twilight, Emma thought of the young cadets she would mentor, the aspiring pilots she would inspire, and the countless stories that would echo the message she had embodied. Rejection is not the end. It is the beginning of a journey that can reach higher than anyone imagined. The sky stretched infinitely before her, a canvas for her courage, skill, and legacy. And for the first time, Emma Sanchez felt truly limitless. The journey that had begun with a single rejection had culminated in mastery, inspiration, and triumph. She had claimed her place in the skies and transformed it into a story of resilience that would endure far beyond her own flights. Emma's name, once doubted and dismissed, was now synonymous with determination, skill, and the power to rise above every obstacle. As the last rays of sunlight faded, she whispered to the horizon, "This is only the beginning." And with that, Emma Sanchez soared into the night, a legacy in motion, a dream realized, and a beacon for all who dared to follow their own path to the skies.